Apparently this was a whale of few words. He just opened his mouth wide and said, "Ah," in the classic tradition. Got a whale of a tale to tell you lads, a whale of a tale or two about the flopping fish and the girls I've... Hello everyone, you're watching YouTube. I'm Isaac and this is 10,000 Pretty Good Books, the channel for parents who care what their children read. And it's time for a review of Burt Dow, Deepwater Man, written and illustrated by Robert McCloskey and published by Viking Penguin Inc. in 1963. Burt Dow is a retired fisherman living in a cozy little house in a bay in Maine. He keeps an old leaky boat called the Tidily Idly, which he paints with leftover paint from the odd jobs he's done for people in the town, and he has a giggling gull for a pet, who often accompanies him when he puts out to sea. One morning, Burt heads out to the end of the bay to fish for cod, but he accidentally hooks something much more substantial. The tip of a whale's tail. The gull gets the whale to quiet down, and Burt removes the barbed hook from the tip of the whale's blubbery tail with his pliers, and then he gives the whale a peppermint-striped Band-Aid. All of a sudden, a giant storm whips up, and because Burt knows that he won't make it back in the leaking Tidily Idly, Burt convinces the whale to swallow him, the giggling gull, and the boat, temporarily of course, until the storm blows over. The whale obliges, and like a yellow-slickered Jonah, Burt sails the boat into the whale's open mouth, down the gullet, and into the whale's belly. Then Burt gets worried that the whale might not have heard the whole plan, or that he might forget that they're only supposed to be temporary guests, and so he begins scooping up the sediment in the bottom of the boat and using a shingle to fling it in spatters all over the inside of the whale's belly. The idea being to make the whale get an upset tummy and eject them back out. The whale begins to quiver, the gull tickles the whale's throat with a feather, and the whale belches them back up. They land smack in the middle of a whole school of whales, pod of whales, all brightly colored in the same colors that Burt had used to paint the Tidily Idly. The whales all start waving and whacking their tails at Burt in his boat, and Burt realizes that they are jealous of the fancy Band-Aid that he gave the first whale. And so Burt gives each of the whales a Band-Aid on the tip of his tail, and the whales all sail off with their tails held high. Burt pumps the water out of the Tidily Idly, cranks the make and break, and with the gull, heads back up the bay. And that's the end. Before I get to my commentary, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Don't miss the next tale. Okay, back to the review. This is Robert McCloskey's last book, and it's quite different from his more well-known books like Make Way for Ducklings or Blueberries for Sal. He amps up the whimsy in this one, and the color of the illustrations as well. The whole thing is a lot more wild and fantastical than his other children's books, and there is a lot to love here. Two things I love about the writing are the regular repetition of sounds, like clackety bang for the make and break engine on the Tidily Idly, or the slish kaslosh of the water pumping out of the boat. I also enjoy the quirky saltwater talk and the unusual idioms throughout the book, such as, the whale couldn't hear because his hearing gear was so far upwind from his steering gear that had come afoul of Burt's cod hook. Or, the whale gave a little snort and didn't say anything. Apparently this was a whale of few words. He just opened his mouth wide and said, "Ah," in the classic tradition. I think we should start using that phrase for mundane things that modern people do. He put gas in his car in the classic tradition. He bagged his groceries in the classic tradition. He ordered his chalupa in the classic tradition. I love the 60s pop color of the illustrations, too. They're unlike anything else that McCloskey did, except maybe Time of Wonder, but even that one is way more restrained than this gorgeous wackiness. Let's take a look at the second best picture in this book. Get a load of this. So here's a picture of the results of Burt's plan to give the whale an upset tummy. He's splattered the sediment all over the pink insides of the whale, and there are accents of cup grease, and Burt is here sloshing and dribbling the gallon of yellow deck paint as the giggling gull looks on. And Burt's enjoying himself. As McCloskey writes, probably because it was the first time he'd ever had a chance really to express his personality in paint. Here's what I love about this picture. McCloskey considered himself an artist first, and only accidentally a children's book author. He would have been quite familiar with the abstract expressionism of Jackson Pollock, both the work and the theory. Jackson Pollock created Autumn Rhythm number 30 in 1950, 13 years before this was published. Now, you could read this as a cute tribute to Pollock, or you could read it as a tongue-in-cheek critique of Pollock, which I think more likely. But it really doesn't matter either way, and here's why. Someday, my children, and your children, will meet someone with fashionable ideas about ugly art, who says something like, you know, Jackson Pollock is actually quite good. And when that happens, our children, not having been deprived of common sense, since they were raised by parents who watch this channel, will be tempted to argue with this person or push back in some way. There's no need. Robert McCloskey has given us all a lovely way of dealing with a fool according to his folly. They can just respond. Say, have you read Burt Dow, Deepwater Man? There's this great part where a sailor's been swallowed by a whale, and he makes the whale belch him up by painting his tummy lining with grease and sediment, and it looks just like a Jackson Pollock. And thus it is that Pollock, whose art does not redeem ugliness and pain, but merely is ugly and painful, has his work in some small part redeemed by one of the greatest children's authors that ever lived. By presenting the imitation of Pollock as a key element of the story, by having it be something rather than not be of anything, and by showing it in the gleeful, fun-filled action of creation by Burt Dow, McCloskey has easily outdone Pollock. He's out-Pollocked Pollock. But he's done it gently, and without saying much, which is more than I can do. I would have made a lousy desert monk. Now, it is a long one. This is 63 or 64 pages. It's 63 pages, and it's wordy. There's sometimes a lot of text accompanying one image. The pitch black page, signaling that Bert and the gull are inside the whale's belly with no light, has 2 full paragraphs of text. So know what you're getting into. Sometimes I'd turn a page and go, okay, here we go. I can tell you, though, my kids sat through the whole thing and enjoyed it enormously, so don't sweat it if you have to take a break halfway through and finish it the next day. Better that than trying to rush it. This book's wonderful. It's a tall tale, great for children with big imaginations, but also full of things a child will connect with, like everyone wanting a Band-Aid when only one knee on one child got scraped. I recommend adding this to your home library and reading it to your children. Please do like and subscribe, but more important, if you know young parents of small children on the hunt for pretty good books, share this video with them. In the classic tradition. If you remember reading Burt Dow, Deepwater Man when you were a child, or you're just excited to check it out, let me know in the comments. And also let me know, what should I review next? See you next time.
Hi.
Hi.